And it's funny how often when I run into people who work in tech, like they'll tell me that their teams follow the Spotify model, or they seem to know something about it. And I'm always like, what is the Spotify model? I want to know about this. And what they did is they built this internal Spotify CI/CD tool called Tingle. And by the time that I got to Spotify, they magically had everyone using this tool. Basically, I would only hear about infrastructure things when people are having problems with it. So I never heard about our CI/CD process. It was perfect. No one ever had a problem with it. Like that was also this like beautiful convenience factor for us. And if you're setting up a new component, it made that very easy because you can follow the template and set it up in like seconds. Even if you're a new developer who just showed up, you can build something in a day. So the teams that I led were all within the advertising space. So I was doing the machine learning for advertising, which is not the cool part of Spotify, but
it's the annoying part of Spotify.
Yes, it is.
This episode is sponsored by Core Engineering Consulting Group. Hello and welcome to today's episode. Today we have with us Eric Langenberg. Did I spell it correctly?
Perfect, okay. Yes.
And Eric was an engineering manager at Spotify, correct?
Yes, this is correct.
Good to have you, Eric.
Thank you. I'm happy to be here.
Can you start with telling us a bit about your education, how you started from after school, and how you ended up being engineering manager at Spotify?
Yes, I'd be happy to. So I definitely had an unexpected trajectory into this space. So in my undergraduate in the US, we have a much more kind of like open educational system. So for college, I was studying a mixture of everything.
Where are you from, by the way?
I'm from the US, and originally from Texas in the US.
Okay.
But I went to school at a small school in Pennsylvania, a liberal arts college, we call it. And so I studied pretty much every subject I could get my hands on, literature, philosophy, psychology, education.
Nothing to do with engineering.
Only a little bit of computer science, like just I think one class in computer science, a few science classes, but really just across the board, I was kind of like taking everything. After that, I went to a philosophy PhD program. So this is even farther from the direction of computer science, at least as most people would think about it. I would actually argue in the way that I see the world that there is some underlying connection in that what actually drew me to philosophy was that it was this mathematical way of thinking applied to like the world of human meaning. And so that was what initially was appealing to me about philosophy, because you do a lot of logic and you're understanding these grand statements about the universe through this format of logic, which has a very similar structure to math. And of course, logic is very important in coding. So there is some hidden
interesting point of view, yeah.
But not one that occurs to anyone. So I think at the time, I definitely decided that I did not want to be an academic philosopher for the rest of my life. I did not have that level of passion or interest in this. I was mostly doing it to avoid getting a proper job. So I think from there, it definitely was not an easy story to pitch to employers about why philosophy was relevant for anything. So I think from there, I basically spent some time writing after I left this PhD program. So I was just writing. I was trying to write fiction. That was not a good fit for me. But I tried and I had fun, but it didn't go anywhere. Then I was just desperately trying to get a job because I was totally out of money, and
eventually you would have to.
Yes. So trying to get whatever I could. And I wound up getting a job at this very small company in the US again, that was as an editor. So I was editing MBA, people applying to MBA programs. I was helping them to apply to their MBA programs. This was my first job because I was getting anything I possibly could. I didn't enjoy the main job at all, but what I did enjoy was this small component where I did a big analysis of their website and kind of like all of the traffic that was coming into that website, came up with a very simple insight that there was this small body of work that we were doing that was responsible for the vast majority of traffic on the website. And so I had the not particularly rocket science intuition. Why don't we do more of that? Let's do the thing that's actually bringing people to this website. Let's build some more of that. And so I came up with like a ton of ideas around how to do that. We chose one that looked the most promising, and it was an immediate success. Like it went on to become the majority of that site's traffic and is still a very central piece of that company today. I think that was like my first taste of this what became a kind of passion of like finding in data, you can find these really profound insights that are able to like shape the world.
And impact.
To drive that impact. And I think for me, this was like, if philosophy was one way of trying to apply this mathematical mode of thinking to the world, it was not a very effective way. But I found that doing this in companies, it was so much more fun because you could actually like have an impact on the world. And then not only that, but you could like feed that back into the data and see the results of what you did and then keep iterating. And you have this whole like...
And get feedback from it.
Yeah, you have this whole beautiful feedback cycle of development. And so I think that was my very first taste of the joy of that process. Should I keep going? Or
next up, what did you do? I mean, after that you found that you had an interest in analyzing data and you found out that how websites were actually, worked. What did you do then?
Yeah, so I went on to another company, basically following the exact same trajectory where I started as an editor at the second job as well, because it was easier for me to get.
Yeah.
But I almost immediately began actually doing analysis work. So this company was a much bigger company. Nobody knows it outside the US, but it's called Comcast. It had a top 40 US website. So they had a lot of traffic on this homepage that I was working on. And so again, I was initially hired as an editor, which meant I was like writing the stuff that was going up on this homepage. But from the start, like I just was analyzing, like I took all of the historical data about all the headlines we'd run in the past. I created this like very rudimentary algorithm, a predictive algorithm of how a headline would perform based on keyword matching. So nothing fancy.
Okay.
And that was effective. And it was also my next taste of like, you look at the data, have the insights and the ideas, but then I got to run a million tests because every single thing that we ran on that website, I looked at as a sort of test. And so any idea that I had, I ran it as a test, saw how it performed, and just kept iterating in that cycle. And so that was another case where I got to really experience this, like the flow of what you can do by finding the insights and data and putting them into practice.
This was back in what year?
Oh, man. Years are hard, but this was a long time ago. So we're probably talking 2014, maybe.
Okay.
Over 10 years ago, I think.
Okay.
At this point. So that job, I had a lot of fun with it. I think I did eventually transition to an analyst position within that job. But still, I didn't feel like I was fully recognized for the actual work that I was doing. So went on another job search to kind of find a job where I could be more fully doing what I was doing. I was very excited about like the media world, and this was 10 years ago, so it was a very different time for media, and this was the age when like people were actually excited about digital media companies. It's hard to imagine now, but BuzzFeed was valued at over $1 billion, and Business Insider, where I went to work, I think they sold actually for around 400 million right around the time when I started. So it was like there was money flowing into this space that it was still considered something that could be viable as a business. So I went to work there. I was leading their data team. So to start with, we were just calling it analytics, which even that was almost an overstatement of the...
What was this company? Sorry, I missed
Business Insider. So it's a US...
So you actually went there. Okay. I know it.
Okay. Yeah. They were quite popular, and they still have some reach.
Yeah.
And I found that was a really great company to work for. They were exploring, it was like a young company, and they were exploring all this new stuff. And so it was a great place if you wanted to work with people who were just trying out everything new that they could and trying to see what works, and very fast paced, very motivated. So it was a great place to work.
I'm sure they had a lot of funding as well, because it was the trending of the time.
Yes. So that helped a lot. And it was growing very rapidly while I was there, which also makes it a more fun place to work. Yeah. And so I think with respect to the data team itself, I think the very first thing I did was just to automate everything, because they were basically, when I arrived, the team was still doing a lot of manual stuff in Excel. So the most basic types of analysis you can imagine. Mm-hmm. So the first thing I said was, we got to stop doing that. Let's eliminate all of that work, because we can do it with some formulas. Like, we really don't need any of this to be happening. So that was kind of the very first step. then I got into kind of like platformizing the data within that company because we were growing really fast. There were a ton of very smart people. And so making it more accessible to people was really important. Part of that was building dashboards, but part of it was also doing some data engineering work to empower other people to get the data and build their own dashboards. So that was kind of one of the many strands of this job, as well as continuing to do a bunch of analyses and finding the insights and all of this.
What kind of tool did you use to do these things?
Yeah, so the primary web analytics, like mainly they're running a website. So the primary web analytics tool we were using was Google Analytics to kind of collect the data. And we wound up mostly working within the Google ecosystem. So I was there for 3 or 4 years. So we changed things while I was there.
So the dashboards in Google Analytics.
In Google Analytics and BigQuery. And I think they brought out a product called Data Studio, if I'm not mistaken, at the time. That we built a lot of dashboards with that. So yeah, a varying set of tools. And I know for some of the data engineering stuff, we got into some projects like with their e-commerce stuff where you had to connect data from different sources. And there we used BigQuery for a lot of that. So that was also fun.
Okay, and next up?
And it was actually in the middle of my time at Business Insider, I went to Facebook. I was very happy at this job. I liked it a lot, but I got recruited away to Facebook.
You couldn't say no.
I couldn't say no. It was a tech company. It seemed exciting. Everybody, people wanted to work there.
Yeah.
I wasn't sure if I wanted to work there, but
And this was all happening in Texas, right?
So no, the first job was in Philadelphia. The Business Insider job was in New York City. So I moved to New York City for that.
Okay.
Facebook, I packed up all my stuff in New York, moved to San Francisco.
To the other side.
Which was an adventure in itself. I think the Facebook job, so I got hired to work on something that was kind of related to Business Insider. So I was leading the data team in their media operations department. And I thought it was fascinating to take a look inside that company. And I think they did a lot of things really well. And to this day, I still take a lot of lessons from the things that they did. So I respect a lot of the things that they did. That role in particular within the media operations group, I didn't find to be the most exciting in the world because the position within this giant company of Facebook that media operations was playing was mostly to try to kind of appease publishers. It was to make publishers a little bit happier, but we couldn't actually change the things that were affecting publishers and media in general. So we didn't have any real sway over the core pieces of what was driving all this at Facebook.
So that feedback got disappeared, right?
I hadn't actually thought through this, but yes, you're right. I think you're right that the cycle of being able to kind of take an action and see the results, you couldn't do it, and not in the same way, at least. And so I kind of found that a little bit less satisfying. I also personally liked living in New York City better. So I actually wound up taking my old job back at Business Insider, which probably not a lot of people would have advised me to make that move, but I have no regrets. I liked it, and it worked out really well. So I went back to this job that I just found to be a lot more fun and engaging instead of the Facebook one.
Every person, makes his decisions based on what he values most, right?
Exactly. Yes. This was a part of the adventure. I can keep going, or
how did you end up going to Spotify?
Okay, so Spotify. So I think after I went back to Business Insider, this was probably around 2017, 2018. A lot of breakthroughs were happening in the space of machine learning at that time. So I think the very first transformer models, which is the technology that underlies ChatGPT, came out in 2017. It was starting to get really impressive, the things that you could do with these machine learning models. So in the midst of everything else I was doing at Business Insider, I was learning a lot about this machine learning space because it just seemed fascinating to me that this field was taking off, and I wanted to see what it could do. So I spent a lot of time learning about that. And
which was actually machine learning at the time did you understand that it was going to be the upgraded version of what you were doing manually?
I did. I definitely saw the relation. So there is a relation between the type of data science that I was doing and machine learning. So that is somewhere in my mind, that was part of it, is wondering if is all of data science eventually going to be replaced by this machine learning and automation? Which I still think it might be, but it's not yet.
Not yet.
But So yes, that was part of the motivation. But a lot of it was just actually just being excited about like when you start to see it was the very early days where it was like reading handwriting and identifying what was in images. These were some of the initial breakthroughs that these deep neural networks were able to do. Mm-hmm. But still, it gives you this sense of potential that you can just connect the data in this way and it figures stuff out and it learns it on its own. So I just had this sense that something was going to happen in that direction. No idea that ChatGPT was going to come out in the way that it did in a few more years, but I just sensed something was there. And I think that's really what kind of like drove me. And so then there weren't I didn't see many opportunities for either applications within Business Insider or the resources to really support that. So I started looking for...
to get more experience on it, because that would be eventually what you wanted to do.
Yes, and it seems so cool to work in that space. And so I think I undertook a very long job search. If there are people out there who are embarking in job searches, I have been through many in my life, and I think I embrace rejection. So it was not like it took a lot of work to kind of eventually find this right job that was the perfect fit for me, which was this Spotify job. So I got incredibly lucky that I found almost exactly what I was looking for, which is a machine learning job at a tech company.
A good tech company.
And it was a great tech company. I loved it. So, but it was definitely like many, many months of effort and applying and rejections. So if anyone is out there job searching
did you do anything technically to enable you to pursue that job? I mean, on your own time.
Yeah.
Since Business Insider didn't provide you with any opportunity.
Exactly. Yeah.
So did you go back to your place after the job and you're doing machine learning algorithms and stuff? Or?
I spent a lot of time learning. I found, I don't know if this exists anymore because this was like 6 or 7 years ago now, but I found this site called Data Quest that really fit with the way that I like to learn. Because it was very active. So on the left side, they would give you a little bit of text. And on the right side, it's like a code. You write code on the right side of the page. And that for me was like a really fun way of learning about this stuff. So it was like a game to do this.
Yeah, gamification of the experience, learning experience.
And so I think that was a lot of how I learned some of the like nuts and bolts of machine learning. Some of the theory behind it, you can't quite do just by writing code. So it was supplemented, I think, by reading about it as well. But I liked having the tangible aspect of like, I'm actually doing something, or else it gets really boring if it just feels entirely theoretical to me.
Okay. And you went to Spotify as, what was your first role there?
So first role was as a machine learning engineering manager. My title was unfortunately long and quite a mouthful. But yeah, so I was managing machine learning engineers was my first role. And there were aspects of that I think were outside of my comfort zone, because there were aspects of the engineering process, and especially like for us, the way that we looked at machine learning engineering, it encompassed not only the machine learning modeling, which is what I'd basically been learning, but also actually back-end engineering. And this was something I didn't know that much about.
Well, what is the difference between the two? So you've talked about modeling and the back-end work. So technically, what does it entail?
Yeah. This is a great question. So modeling, like in the traditional, so if we go back to like old school machine learning of 5 or 6 years ago, before this large language model stuff became this new paradigm that has emerged. If we go back to that period of time, what it meant to build a machine learning model is that you have a large set of training data. This is at least the most popular type of machine learning, which is called supervised machine learning. So you have a big set of data. You have these things that we call features, which is kind of like input data. And then you have labels, which is the output that you're kind of trying to predict. And you feed all of this data into a machine learning algorithm, basically, and ask it to like learn the patterns in that data by a series of statistical processes. So that's what it is to like train a model. And that requires an interesting sort of skill set, I guess, but it follows, that has its own flow of figuring out how to train that model, tune the hyperparameters, evaluate how well your model is doing.
So you discard the outliers and everything just to get it correctly.
So it has a lot of parallels to like the data science.
Analysis, data science stuff.
Yeah,
okay.
And there's many places that actually call the people who do that work, they still call them data scientists. In some companies, there's all these terms get a little bit messy, but
for now, yeah, because it's still new. But the large language models, when they came out, what was the big difference that made them stand out and do this huge difference we see today?
The difference with large language models compared to this old approach of training your own model is that the large language models are these vast pre-trained models. And so it requires billions and billions of dollars to train one of these large language models like ChatGPT, at least in their modern iterations. Don't cite me on the statistics there. I should probably look up how much it actually costs, but it's a lot of money.
Yeah.
So not everybody can train this, and you have to have like all of the world's data to train these models on now. So you're doing this enormous body of work to pre-train this model, and then they store all of the information in that model in these parameters. And so that's why if you dig into these large language models, they'll often talk about the number of parameters in the model as kind of a way of bragging about it.
Okay.
I think OpenAI doesn't release, I think, the number of parameters that are actually in their model, but Llama, because it's open source, does. And so I think their latest might have like 405 billion parameters or something.
Okay,
so
and you can utilize them with an API and build your own model based on that, but with less training because it's already trained.
Exactly. Okay. So you're like downloading this big model that's already been pre-trained and contains a compressed version of like a lot of the world's knowledge and information, as well as how language works and all these other things that these models are capable of. And you don't have to do all that work anymore. Like there are ways that you can fine tune those models and apply it to particular tasks. And in the very first iterations of this, like in the first of these transformer models that existed was called BERT, was released by Google. And there it was usually necessary to fine tune it if you were trying to apply it to a business case, because it wasn't so advanced as the current models. So if I wanted to like classify podcast content, for example, which is one of the things that my teams did at Spotify. And this is exactly the technology that we used for a while, was to like use a BERT model. So you're drawing from this large pre-trained model, but you still have to do work on top of that to fine tune it for your particular use case. You can't just be like, hey, BERT, classify this for me, and it does it in the way that the modern LLMs can.
They do most of the work, but you have to fine-tune it for your needs based on your case.
Yeah, they make your work a lot easier because they give you this foundation that understands language, but it doesn't contain everything that you need. And so you definitely still have to fine-tune those early models in order to make them work for a business use case.
And now we talk about the machine learning algorithm part of your team. Mm-hmm. The backend side. I'm sure that was the one side that you wasn't familiar with. Mm-hmm. Right.
Yeah. So at Spotify, I don't know if this is how terms are used globally, but within our teams, we basically divided this machine learning engineering space into these two core competencies, one of which is training the models. And basically everything else that our teams did, we just lumped together as back-end engineering. So this means both the process of productionizing a model. So there's a difference between training a model, which means you're like taking those input data and output data and like having it learn the patterns. And then there's another process that's serving the model. So when you put that model into production, and now it's like for every single Spotify user, as they're using the app, we want that model to make a prediction. That's different. We don't have to retrain the model every time we're making a prediction.
Yeah, it's actually the usability of that model on the product you have.
Exactly.
Right? So to make it, wrap it up in an API for the front-end engineers to call it and get the results.
Exactly. And so this is like the process of model serving, as we called it. In the modern large language model space, you'll often hear about this as like inference time. It's the inference where you're drawing from the information contained in the model, but you're applying it to this specific immediate use case.
Okay.
And in the case of Spotify, that would be like you're feeding in the data about how the user is currently using the app and using that to make a prediction based on this model that you've pre-trained.
Yeah, makes sense.
Okay, so that's kind of like ML ops is one component. And then there's a third group that we also lumped into this back-end engineering category, which is building the service around the model that actually makes it take action in the world. And so a model in itself is just generating a prediction, at least if you're doing supervised learning. So to make it, like, you actually have to have a lot of other layers of logic in order to make that have action in an application like the Spotify app. And so that was like a third layer, even though our engineers were called machine learning engineers. That piece didn't actually involve any machine learning per se, except that it was figuring out how to apply the machine learning model to a production use case.
Okay. This episode is sponsored by Code Engineering Consulting Group. CSNG is a principle-driven strategic advisory led by expert engineers who have been at the forefront of platform engineering from the start. CSNG empowers software development teams to achieve unmatched speed, security, and scalability while optimizing costs. And this was your team. Like, from my experience, when you say Spotify, I always think of some of the things that Spotify contributed to the community, like the Spotify model, where it specifies how each team would interact with each other and how they would be formed. I also remember there was a Spotify Maven plugin that helped us a lot with Dockerizing Java applications and then uploading to container registries. And there are a lot of tools that Spotify did well inside the company and wanted to contribute to the community, much like Google does, I think. But Spotify was, I don't know, I think of it as more modernized, methods that they applied, as opposed to Google that, because of the size, it got a bit behind. So can you describe some of those organizational structures that the company followed and how the teams were interacting with each other to see if it actually, what they tell us is actually what they do?
Yeah, great question. So we can kind of start with the organizational side. And it's funny how often when I run into people who work in tech, like they'll tell me that their teams follow the Spotify model, or they seem to know something about it. And I'm always like, what is the Spotify model? I want to know about this. But
you should call it the model because
it's hard for me to distinguish like what is the Spotify model versus just like what our teams were doing. But I have some idea of this because people have told me enough about what the Spotify model is. So typically what people talk about when they talk about that, we could maybe start at the lowest angle of the organization, which is what they called the squad. And so this is like an individual team that the developers are working on is called a squad. And this piece generally, like this story that is publicly told, if anyone has ever heard about Spotify in this respect, is pretty accurate. Like, so the idea of a squad at Spotify is that it's an individual product team. So they're supposed to own the end-to-end product as closely as you can do that at a 10,000 person company. You try to create an individual team that's able to own a discrete product on their own, and you have every cross-functional person who is needed on that same team working together. And so this differs from models that you can have at different companies where they might separate out different functions more.
Stacks.
And so that's like one piece of this model. And generally, it also goes along with really trying to give these teams as much autonomy as possible. So every team is basically just given freedom to figure out what works for you. There's not a lot of top-down processes that are enforced. Generally, every team is able to choose their own tools that they want to use and do things however they want. They could work in a totally different way than other teams. And that's all kind of built into the model. And it's supposed to theoretically maybe make each team resemble like a startup thing where they're fast and nimble. I don't know that it really feels like working at a startup when you're working at Spotify. I don't think it goes quite that far, but it does give each team a lot of flexibility and adaptability. And that's something that, especially when I was an engineering manager managing just one team, I really appreciated having that autonomy to like figure out what works for our team. And I thought that was a much more fun way of being an engineering manager than at a company like Facebook, where it was very carefully like regimented and they had firmly established processes that they were forcing everyone to follow. And I found it so much more like organic and better for people to be able to figure out what works for that team.
Okay. About the autonomy you said, what does that mean about the dependencies the engineering team had? Like when they're trying to build a product, they would have a dependency to make up some firewall rules in the wider firewalling system of Spotify or whatever, build some cloud infrastructure, or make CI/CD pipelines and actually deploying the end product they wanted. How did they figure out how to do that? Did they have dependencies they were expecting other people to do? Or that autonomy was also accompanied by other tools that helped them and enabled them to become efficient and, actually be autonomous in deploying?
So there are many different layers of this question, I think. I know the CI/CD stuff I know is one of your particular interests, as it should be. So I will say by the time I entered Spotify, they had already consolidated, like I think in maybe 2 or 3 years before I got to Spotify in 2019, I think they still had that as a very fragmented system as well, where each team was kind of doing their deployments in different ways with their own Jenkins. It was kind of a mess at some point in time. And what they did is they built this internal Spotify CI/CD tool called Tingle. And by the time that I got to Spotify, they magically had everyone using this tool. I don't know exactly what they did to roll that out because
we'll Google it.
Typically at Spotify, it was so hard. These platform teams built a lot of great stuff, and yet it was really hard to get adoption among teams because they were given this autonomy to pick and choose which tools they wanted to use. And sometimes even if the tool that Spotify is offering is better, it takes a lot of work sometimes to migrate into a new system, and teams don't want to do it. So it can take a long time to get adoption on these.
But they managed to do it.
They managed to do it. And I think that they did this because it worked so beautifully well. And so
so seamless.
The CI/CD process for us, it was like a dream of really the automation of this worked very well. At my level as an engineering manager and then a manager of managers a little bit later, basically, I would only hear about infrastructure things when people are having problems with it. So I never heard about our CI/CD process. It was perfect. No one ever had a problem with it. Tingle would beautifully automate the testing, the build. It would build things. It would test automatically through all the unit integration system tests, and would do the build after that. Also, typically, I think the default was that you would launch to Canary first and would go through another round of automated testing in the Canary environment. And it worked very well.
Okay. Maybe there's an article about it, how they build it, because Spotify usually does. Yeah. And maybe it's related to Backstage platform that they also launched as an open source.
Yeah. And Backstage, I think, okay, it's open source. I wasn't sure if it was open source, if it's a product that
Backstage
they're selling.
is open source, but some companies, take it and commercialize it, but it's underneath its open source code.
Okay, yeah. So I think Backstage, is the portal that you use. It's like a web portal that collected all the documentation, as well as I don't have the right words for referring to this because it's not my space, but it's not only the documentation, but it's representations of the actual code and components and repos are all contained in this portal.
Because it retrieves everything that it needs to do this automations, I think.
Yeah. And so that was also this beautiful convenience factor for us. And if you're setting up a new component, it made that very easy because you can follow the template and set it up in seconds. Even if you're a new developer who just showed up, you can build something in a day.
Exactly. What about you mentioned testing, automated tests while you deployed, and if something is in production as well. I think you mentioned Canary deployments. Those tests were developed by the developers, or did you have another team that tested the whole thing as an end-to-end testing? So
honestly, we didn't have any separate team that did testing. So there was no separate testing function that was owned by the engineers within this squad. So each squad that's building a product that was responsible for their own testing. And that is one way where I think they followed this squad model as it was intended to be done. Yeah. So that you have to own the full thing. And then once you build it, you also have to own maintaining it and keeping it running. So that's also a good way to enforce good practices, because you don't want to put out something that's terrible into production. So yeah, they were writing at least the unit tests and the integration tests they were running. There might have been some tests that were like applied across Spotify, and I never paid any attention to those. So I don't know exactly the full testing architecture.
Maybe it was something for all the teams, that maybe it was a test suite for all the teams.
Yeah.
That was just being run just to make sure everything was fine after the teams deployed something.
Yeah. Plausibly.
Possibly. So the backend engineers, they deployed something on the cloud. Oh, sorry, on some server. Do you actually know which infrastructure you were using, in which cloud you were using, if it was cloud or not? All these servers, where did they end up being deployed, if you remember?
I certainly didn't.
Okay.
We paid attention. I mean, we definitely kept track of things by region. So we were keeping track of like regional metrics anytime we were evaluating performance. We used Kubernetes and also Google Cloud was like our general ecosystem that we were using. Okay. So like that was what the tech stack looked like, but I never thought about any of this.
Okay. All right. It's good enough for me. Okay, back to your team. You had a machine learning task to do, let's say. Can you tell us one particular thing that we as Spotify users might see in the actual app now that you did or you were working on?
So the teams that I led were all within the advertising space. So I was doing the machine learning for advertising, which is not the cool part of Spotify, but
it's the annoying part of Spotify.
Yes, it is. So only if you use the free product would you have actually experienced this work, and you probably experienced it with annoyance, but to some extent, we could argue that we were trying to make it less annoying by increasing the relevance of your ads. There was a small fraction of like win-win that we could try to generate, which we were certainly trying to.
Do you have any tips of not getting ads while
I do. I know certain techniques for ad avoidance, but we actually took steps to prevent that. So now you're going to get penalized if you try to avoid the ads. Okay. It used to be that you could actually like swipe the app closed during an ad break and restart the app and then not get ads, but we fixed it. So now you're going to get those ads anyway. You can't get out of it. At least in Cyprus, there's a lot less ads than in the US. So at least you have that.
So there is regional separation of how many ads.
Yes, there's different rules for different markets, which is mostly based on ad demand, actually.
Okay.
In the US, like they really want to advertise to people all the time.
And the market is bigger. So
yeah. So all of the teams that I worked on were related to that. There was one of the many teams was specifically actually focused on the problem of relevance. So they were trying to make ads more relevant for users. And that's a case that we were at least hoping would be win-win, which makes the user experience better and is better for advertisers. We had another team that is responsible for predicting outcomes that advertisers care about. This is like kind of one of the most classic machine learning problems because companies like Google and Facebook were really the first to get really deep into the machine learning space. This is exactly the problem that they were solving, is like, how do we predict the outcomes advertisers are looking for? And so this could be something, the most immediate for us was a click, right? So if you are on an ad and you click it, we're trying to predict how likely is it that you as a user are going to click on any of the ads that we have the opportunity to serve you right now. And we want to put the ad in front of you that you're the most likely to click. So that's kind of like a use case for these machine learning models.
And the data of the user, how did you collect them? I mean, you only had the Spotify platform.
Yes.
Data. Did you buy data from other services?
No. So Spotify is actually, this was, I like this about Spotify, that they are not stalking you everywhere you go online. It also makes the job a lot more difficult as a machine learning who's trying to improve the ad experience, because like it is really useful. Like Facebook and Google, it's not just when you're using those platforms that they're tracking you. They have tracking pixels all over the web. And so you can't avoid it no matter how much you want to. They are tracking you. They know.
It's not the only the website you see that, the Facebook.com.
Yeah, it's not just when you're in Facebook. It's everywhere. Yes, you visit any website and they know you're there and they're using it in their advertising models. So we didn't have that level of data to work with. That was for sure a huge constraint that we had to work with, and is probably why your ad experience on Spotify does not feel as tailored to your interests as something like Facebook and Google.
Okay.
But on the plus side, we're not stalking everyone. So that's a nice thing.
You can appreciate that, yeah.
And I think part of that might actually have been, like, I wasn't at all responsible for like making the policy decisions on like, should we be purchasing ads? Should we be working harder to get all of that data on people? But maybe part of it is that it's based in Sweden and like there's just a sense of maybe respect for people.
Yeah, maybe EU.
And EU laws, yes. It could be. That law might be a more plausible explanation.
Yeah. And so how did you find the data? It's all the data was from the listening, the songs that the people listened.
So we have user history. We have how you interacted with past ads, which is a very limited data set.
Yeah.
Podcasts, I actually do think were like a somewhat richer source of information than listening to music. So
they're categorized better to understand.
You can understand someone's interests a little bit better than if you just know what band they listen to. It's not quite as predictively useful. And then, of course, they made a big push into the podcast space while I was there. And so we were also placing ads within the Spotify podcast. I don't know if you use the platform at all.
I do. I don't know if any of the listeners hear any ads.
So there we had another form of targeting that is based on like contextual targeting, which means we're trying to match an ad to the podcast content. So that's another way where like it's a different way of trying to target it that isn't reliant on any information about the user, except that they're listening to that particular podcast at that point in time. So relatively less creepy, I think, but doesn't quite give you the quality of ads.
Okay. So any other thing that you did? You mentioned something about podcasts that you were driving. There was a lot of traction about podcasts while you were there. Did you do anything about that?
Yeah, so the exact contextual targeting thing that I was talking about, we had a team that was categorizing podcasts. And so throwback from much earlier in the conversation where we were fine-tuning a BERT model. That's how that team was originally producing those categories. So we would transcribe, we used like a whisper model to transcribe the podcast. And then we would run the transcripts through this natural language processing system based on the BERT model in order to predict what that podcast was fundamentally about. And there were several different categorical systems that we were using. One was just like topical based on advertiser interest. So we're trying to create that match between what advertisers are interested in, what the podcast is about. And then some others were related to just other kind of like internal needs that we have to categorize podcasts and provide insights.
Okay. So whenever we hear ads in Spotify, we'll think of...
Think of me, yes. Exactly.
Okay. What are your next steps now, Eric? You are in Cyprus, by the way. You've been to Cyprus for how long?
For 3 months.
3 months. Did you like it?
I have loved Cyprus. It is a very nice place. It's my 49th country in the world, and I find it is one of the places where people feel the most like welcoming and inclusive. Everyone knows English. It's a beautiful place, and I love it. Yes.
49 countries, you said.
Yes.
How come?
How come? I just like it. I like traveling.
Were you a digital nomad?
Yeah, and so I'm a nomad now for sure. And I don't know where I'm going to go next because I'm almost out of my tourist time in Cyprus, but I'll figure it out. And I've come from Spain, UK, France before here. So.
Okay, how did you like the EU? Did you find it better than States or?
The EU in general?
EU, yeah, because you've been to Spain and yes. I was definitely yes.
Yeah, I think the quality of life in Europe is much better. It depends a little on where you're at in life. There's some advantages to living in the US, but I think in general, life is better in the EU.
Okay, that's good for us. And now what are your next steps?
Yeah, so I retired about 6 months ago from Spotify. I retired is one way to put this, since I did this basically because of my finances, but it's not because I want to do nothing for the rest of my life. So I'm still for sure working on a ton of projects. I've now become very interested in kind of like this next wave of AI app development using these pre-trained large language models for the development process in different ways. So I'm working on just a lot of like projects for fun right now that are generally exploring that technology in space. Especially creating these like AI agents, which there's a lot of buzz about right now. Unfortunately, I've drunk the Kool-Aid and I'm also very interested. And I think in the future, what I'm looking to do is really get more involved with projects with other people again, since this is the thing that I miss from having a proper job. And
interaction.
So if anyone is out there, has ideas of things they want to do with AI.
Yeah, we're going to put your details down in the description of the
exactly.
podcast.
Reach out. Let's work on something together. I'm looking for people to work with.
All right. Okay. Thank you very much, Eric, for being here with us. If anyone is interested in learning more about machine learning, we have another podcast that describes everything in AI related with Xenia Miskoridou. So scroll a bit back to find it. Thank you very much again, Eric. I hope you're enjoying your stay here in Cyprus, the rest of the trip. And I hope to see you again.
Okay, thank you. This was great.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.